Good morning, church. So I started this morning. I said, you know what? I don't think I need the light, but I'm going to take a moment here because now that the lights are turned off, I actually do need the light. So bear with me for a moment. And ironically, today's message is about light, so I think that's a little fitting. But as we get going this morning, we are not going to be preaching from a book from Paul's letters, as Barbara was surprised when I sent her our scripture for this morning. We are actually going to be spending our time in Matthew, looking at a portion of the Sermon on the Mount. So as you prepare to flip on that, I do want to kind of speak to one aspect, and that is we live in a glorious time. And I know there's probably some question about what exactly I'm highlighting. Let me tell you, right now at this point in the world, we have so much going on in the world of sports. It is absolutely fantastic. We've got football, we've got basketball ramping up, we've got your local Padres competing for, I guess it's a wild card spot that they're in now. They can't really do much at this point, but we have a lot going on. Now, if you know me, you know I'm a sports fan. I'm somewhat active. I like to think I'm really good in sports. Reality is I do okay. I get out there and I participate. But on Friday night, I was having a conversation with one of my other captains on the team to our team after a game was played. And we were talking about kind of a philosophy that we have with the team. So for reference, my hockey team plays under the name Spitfires. And if you ever see our jersey, one of the first things you'll say is that is not a Spitfire plane. Yes, I know. The guy who drew it up, though, really loved the plane, so I'm stuck with it now because we've already spent way too much money on jerseys. But we were talking about what it means to play for that jersey, for that team, that we represent something much greater than the sport. We play to have fun, but we play to also show that you can play the right way. And why I bring this up is, if you're a sports fan, if you're a fan of anything really, you know, if I said, you know, I was putting on a black shirt today with a pink outline and a white number 3, I think most of you would recognize that as being Dale Earnhardt Jr. If I were to put on a gray jersey with blue lettering and some pinstripe and no name on the back, I'm sure most baseball fans would recognize that as a Yankees jersey. And if I happen to don on the goldish bronze, yellowish color and red with 2 numbers and 2 letters, I think most of you would recognize that as a 49er outfit. Now, that'll never happen. Rest assured on that. I am a tried and true Bronco fan to the core. I will live and die on that hill. But you would recognize that. Now, here's the thing about putting on a jersey. A player knows that when they put on a jersey, they represent more than just themselves. Yes, they play for individual accolades. Yes, they will be recognized by people for their performance, but ultimately they are playing for that city and they represent that organization. So what they do with that jersey on has an impact. Now, if they play well, they perform well, they get recognized as a team doing great things. But when they lose, they start to battle the pain of defeat. If you're a sports fan, right now, actively NFL sports fan, there was a team within the last week to 2 weeks where the starting quarterback on the very first play made a very bad decision and in his performance threw an interception to the other team. Now, as a fan of that team, you immediately started thinking and questioning, is this team really going to do anything valuable this year? Based on one play, on one person's performance. This is a bad team, and here they go doing what they always do, messing up their season. In that moment, the performance of that one individual impacted the opinion of others on that team and who they represent. And this morning, we're going to take a look at how Jesus essentially outlines the same for you and I today in the portion of the Sermon on the Mount that we will be looking at, which is chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. And so the question I offer to you as we go into this is, if the same is true for us, and Jesus is saying that the exact same is said about us, that as followers of him, as followers of Christ, we wear his name and represent him in front of a watching world, then the question is, if they're watching, who are they seeing? So starting in verse 13 of chapter 5, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled under people's feet. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. And in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." So, right from the start, Jesus throws out this bold identity statement when he says, "You are the salt of the earth." Now, he doesn't say, "Hey, try to be the salt. Hey, maybe someday you'll be salty when you're holy enough." No, he says, you already are salt. If you belong to me, if you are a follower of Christ, this is who you are. This is your identity. So the question is not how do you become salt, but rather it's will you live like you're salt? So what does it mean to be salt? Well, to understand this, I think it's appropriate to understand the cultural placement of it. So back then, salt really wasn't optional. If you think about it, Jesus never mentions pulling anything out of the refrigerator ever in his writings, in his teachings. There were not refrigerators at that time, so salt was really an essential part of life. It acted as a preserver of food, specifically with meat. And what it did is it allowed the meat to not rot as quickly. And so slowing the decay, preserving the food, it acted as something good and prevented something bad from happening. Now, in hockey, again, I play hockey, so there are going to be a few hockey references. But in hockey, we have this saying called hold the line. Hold the line. And what does hold the line mean? Well, it means as a defense, the opposing team is going to be charging at you and attacking you. And so we have this zone that's marked off by a physical blue line. And as a defense, it is our job to hold that line. We want to keep the threat out of our zone. Hold the line. And essentially, that's what Jesus is getting at here when he says we are to be salt in the world. We are to preserve what is good and keep it from rotting. Church, we live in a world that is rotting both morally and spiritually. And Jesus calls his followers then and today to be a preserving force in that environment, to stand for the truth, to stand to what is right, to hold the line and keep it from falling apart. But another truth about salt is it wasn't just to preserve food, but it was made to make things taste a little better. Now, if you enjoy fast food, if you enjoy fries, there's a certain company with a golden arch-like symbol that tends to get glorified for having one of the best fries on the market. Debatable, but they tend to be regarded highly for their fries. And what is one of the defining factors about their fries? The salt content makes them taste better. In the same way, our lives are meant to bring Jesus to the world around us. We show Jesus in our lives to all those in our circles, in our work environment, in our school environment, and we show them not just through our words, but through our actions. Now, anybody here ever shop at Costco? Cool things about Costco is pretty much every aisle you go down, they have these little samplers for you, right? And what is the purpose of these little samples they give you? To advertised to entice you to buy. Now, if you go at the right time of the day, like you're hungry, right? So like, hey, try this little hot dog and like barbecue sauce. It's really delicious. It's great, yay. And what happens? Well, oftentimes you're probably walking to the said aisle and grabbing those out. They draw your attention and make you experience what is good. And this is the truth about salt. We are to help people recognize their spiritual hungerness and allow them to look for that experience to taste and see that the Lord is good. So when someone encounters your life, your character, your love, your joy, they should see a sample of the kingdom, a flavor that makes them desire more. But here's the thing, I think if being honest, we would all say that there are parts of living in this world that can be viewed as very bland. And we could even go as far as saying there are parts within our own Christian lives that maybe feel fairly bland as well. Not because Jesus himself is bland, or certainly not because the gospel is bland, but because we've stopped living salty lives. If we're called to be salt, the salt of the earth, but our faith feels dull or flavorless, I don't think the problem isn't the salt. I think it's that the salt has been left in the shaker. That we've lost our distinctiveness. We've begun to blend into our environment. We've stayed quiet when we're supposed to speak up. That we're present in a world, but we're not being an influence within it. So as I was reflecting on this week, I was kind of going through some of these reflection questions, and I want to present them to the church today, not to shame anyone, but just to help us really take in this principle, this concept. And those questions I was working through this week were, have you been going through the motion spiritually? Showing up, saying the right words, but not really engaging in your heart? Are you trying so hard to fit in that no one around you ever knows that you follow Jesus? Have maybe you compromised your convictions for comfort, for popularity, and for ease of life? Or is your faith mostly about consuming and watching, listening, or even just partially attending, but rarely about contributing? Are there moments when the Spirit is nudging you to speak, to encourage, or act, but rather you choose to stay silent? Church, these are signs of a bland faith. And the truth is, bland faith doesn't stir hunger in anyone. It doesn't preserve what is good. It doesn't add flavor to anything. It just blends in. So if our faith is feeling bland, it's not because Jesus is lacking flavor. It's because we've stopped seasoning our world with his presence. But Jesus goes on to talk about other aspects and what he's talking about here with salt. And this goes back to a teaching back in Old Testament, which would be Leviticus chapter 2. And that is that beyond just adding flavor and preserving, salt also acts as a symbol of purity and of covenant. Leviticus 2 says, "You shall season all your grain offerings with salt, the salt of the covenant with your God." Now, every offering to God had to include salt. Why? Well, it was because salt was a symbol. It stood for loyalty. It stood for permanence and for holiness. It reminded Israel that their relationship with God was sacred and not to be taken lightly. So when Jesus here says, "You are the salt of the earth," he is not just saying, be useful. He's saying, live as a covenant-keeping people. Live with purity. Live with faithfulness. Live in such a way that the world would get a glimpse of what God is like: pure, faithful, and unchanging. Your life should reflect the character of your covenant. But I want to highlight another truth here in what Jesus is saying. Jesus gives a warning when he says that if salt has lost its taste, how shall its saltiness be restored? Well, here's what he means. In its purest form, salt will not go bad. Salt will not go bad. But back in that time, salt was often mixed with other minerals. So as the salt would be washed away, as moisture would pull it out, all that they were left with is this white residue, this white substance, and it had no purpose to serve. It was useless. And because it was useless, we see that it was thrown out to be trampled upon. It looked the part, but it did not serve any good. So the picture Jesus is painting here is someone who looks like a Christian on the outside, but whose life has lost any power. There's no distinctiveness, there's no conviction, there's no contrast, there's no flavor. They lived blended in with the world around them. Jesus doesn't soften blows. And he says that kind of life, a life that's not on fire, that has no purpose, is good for nothing. It's to be thrown out and trampled upon underfoot. So if we lose our saltiness, if we lose our witness, we lose our influence. If the church loses its distinctiveness, the world will not be drawn to it. It will walk over it. Don't just look like salt. He says, live like it. Live with covenant loyalty. Live with spiritual flavor. Live in a way that preserves what is good and reflect who God is. Live in a way that the world desperately desires God. So Jesus is calling his people to be influential, people who make differences just by showing up and living who they are through him. But he doesn't stop teaching at Salt. He takes it a step further. He starts talking about how we are to live when salt is not enough. And he transitions into another illustration about light. When we need more direction, we need more guidance. So he goes on to say, you are the light of the world. Let that sink in. You are the light in the world. And I want you to consider what Jesus says in John chapter 8 when he says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. So if Jesus is saying he's the light, but here in the Sermon on the Mount, he's saying we're the light, well, which is it? Is he the light or are we the light? It's one of the answers where the answer is yes. It's both. Simply put, he is the source of light, and we are the reflection of his light. Just like the moon reflects the sun, we are reflecting the light of Christ into the world, which is lost in darkness. Now, thinking about this world of darkness, it kind of took me back. So last summer, my family and I, while on vacation, we went and visited these lava tubes outside of Flagstaff, and I got some pictures that I want to show. So this is as we're walking into the lava tube. It was really cool. So within the first few feet, we immediately saw ice on the ground, which was kind of crazy because it was like 98 degrees, 10 feet back. So it was really interesting to see how quickly that ice started to form and stayed there. But as we go through these, you can see you pretty much can't see anything behind Beck. It was dark. Now, next picture is a picture of the entire family as we went through this. But here's what stood out to me about this. So at one point, as we were navigating down this lava tube, I was blown away with purely the size of the opening. The cavern was absolutely huge. But really quick, you can recognize the environment you were in was very dark, felt very alone. And at one point, the entire family there decided we're going to turn off our lights and just see how dark this really is. Now, in that moment, I have never been surrounded by this level of darkness ever before. There were no city lights, no glow from stars, no lights from phones, no flicker of light at all, just absolute pure darkness. Now, what do I mean by that? I brought my hand to this point in front of my nose. I could not see my hand. I knew my hand was there. I felt the presence of my hand, but I absolutely could not make out my hand. And then we began to turn lights back on. That little bit of light, just from one flashlight, changed the entire atmosphere around us. We were able to open our eyes again. We were able to see the environment around us, to see the path we were on. Gave us a little bit of a sense of where we were at. Church, a little bit of light goes a long way to counter the darkness. And that's the kind of light that we're called to be in the world that we're living in. Our culture today, if we were honest, is a lot like this cavern. We live in a world that is chasing its own views and pushing a different set of rules and criteria that we should live by. It's very dark, and at times we may lose the visibility. We may lose a sense of direction, and we know the world is teaching that sense of direction. But a little bit of light has a huge impact. Just one light turning on in that dark cave changed everything. Why? Well, I want to recognize our part in that before we get to the why. And that is that Jesus was saying, you are the light of the world. Not try to be the light, not one day become the light, but you are the light. It is who you are. It is your identity as a follower of Christ. You are the light. And much like that cave, the light didn't first ask for permission to start lighting up the cavern. Once the light was turned on, it did its job. It brightened up the environment around us. It didn't do anything but serve its purpose and its identity. And the same is true for you and I. When we belong to Jesus, when we allow the light that is within us and who we are, the DNA of who we are in Christ, when we live our life with integrity, we shine. When we speak with truth, with compassion, we shine. When we love people well, when we forgive when it's hard to, or maybe when people say we shouldn't, when we choose faithfulness over comfort, we shine. That's our purpose. That's who we are. That's our identity. Don't have to be flashy, just have to be faithful. Then Jesus goes on to talk about, again, the purpose of light. The purpose of light is to be seen. He says a city on the hill cannot be hidden. Now, at that time, most of the cities were built on hills for protection. So at night, as their fires were going, as they were lighting up the city, it really made the city become visible from afar. They were glowing beacons in the darkness, much like a lighthouse would be on the side of a hill near the ocean. And Jesus was saying that that's what your life should be like. Your life's not meant to be flashy, it's not meant to be performative, but visible, able to be seen. Christianity was never meant to be hidden. Your faith isn't just about comfort, it's about witness. If you're a follower of Christ, people should be able to tell, not because of how loud you are about it, but because of how lit up you are because of his character, the things that he's doing in your life. Church, we weren't saved to be silent. We were lit up to be seen. And Jesus goes on with this illustration saying, nor do people light up a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand and give light to all in the house. So here he's saying, again, light has purpose. You wouldn't turn on a lantern, dig a hole and bury the lantern in the hole. It's absurd. You wouldn't put a flashlight in the cave under rocks. No, you need that light to serve a purpose. And that's what he's saying here. The purpose of light is to give light in a dark environment. But if that's the case, then isn't it kind of convicting how often we do hide the light? How we may keep quiet about our faith at work? How we may downplay what we believe in around certain friends, or altogether avoid speaking up when God prompts us to? Maybe out of fear, maybe out of shame, may just be out of a desire to blend in. But that's not the purpose we were called to. We were called to be lights that brighten up. A light under a basket is failing its purpose. Yes, it's still a light, but it's not living up to what it was intended to do. God didn't light your life just to keep your spirituality warm. He lit up your life to make others spiritually see. We live in a world where people are walking through moral fogs and spiritual confusion, where they're searching for identity, they're searching for direction, they're searching for something that makes sense. Be the light. Jesus says, be the light in the world that you are. Now, not only does light serve a purpose, but to quote the modern day prophet Uncle Ben from Spider-Man, with great power comes what? Great responsibility. Light not only serves a purpose, but it also comes with a responsibility, and that's what we've been talking about. And that is that the way we live our life, the choices we make, the grace we show others, the truth we speak, it all matters. It all points people somewhere. And I know where you're thinking, well, where's my life point? Well, I do got to go back to Paul on this one. In his letter to the Philippians, he says in chapter 2, you shine as lights in the world, in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation. Your light, honestly, church, may be the only light anyone ever sees that points them to the gospel. So shine it well, because even a little bit of light can change a dark atmosphere. Don't just carry the light, shine it. Shine with conviction, shine with courage, shine with joy, shine with purpose. You are the light in the world, so don't hide it, shine it. Now, as we come here to a close in verse 16, Jesus wraps up this portion of the Sermon on the Mount with a challenge and a vision about lifting our eyes. And he says, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. It's not about just being the light in the world. It's about what it's meant to do, and that's to glorify God. It's not about bringing glory to ourselves. It's not about highlighting our own actions. It's not about getting the applause, as we were talking about with the hockey team this week. It's not about us. There's no fans in the stands who are recruiting me to play in the NHL. I guarantee you that. But how I act on the ice, how I respond to coworkers at work when it's stressful, how I act while at the grocery store can point others to God. We are called to shine, to glorify Him. So again, let your light shine before others. It's a reminder that our faith is not meant to be hidden. It's not meant to be isolated. It's not meant to be put under a basket. It's not personal, but it's available to be seen by others to glorify God. So as we come to a close, I want to go back to that illustration of a moon real quick and just highlight at night. If you look up, and I'm sure everyone here at one point's done this, if you look up at the moon at night, what do you see? You see light. And sometimes that light's so bright that maybe you can see the whole garden in front of you. You can see the road you're driving on. But the truth is the moon's not doing anything to create light. It's reflecting the light that it's been given, the light of the sun. So church, May we live our life in such a way that we reflect the same light. We do it courageously, and we do it nonstop. We make an impact in the dark world around us. Amen.